Good evening from Rocky Mountain PBS. I'm Cynthia Hessin. This is Colorado State of Mind. Tonight, a new investigative report from iNews at Rocky Mountain PBS tracking gun deaths in the state from 2000 through 2011. A startling average of 10 fatalities by firearm every week during those 12 years. And iNews zeroes in on Colorado's deadliest neighborhood, a place with the highest number of gun deaths. We'll tell you more about the place and how it has changed since it was first developed in the 1960s. 6,258 is the total number of Colorado residents who died by gunshot from 2000 through 2011. As an iNews analysis revealed several weeks ago, more than 3/4 of those were suicides, about 1 in 5 homicides. Joining me now with more, Burt Hubbard, editorial director of iNews at Rocky Mountain PBS, and senior reporter Kevin Vaughan. As we're all aware, 2 of the nation's deadliest mass shootings occurred here in Colorado, Columbine and Aurora, with the horror of so many people hurt and dying all at once. But this number, more than 6,200 people who have died by guns, is grave in a different way.
Absolutely. I mean, it's the thing for us as we looked at the numbers was just that it's unrelenting. It's week after week, month after month, year after year. Get out a calculator, it's 10 deaths a week, every week for 12 years.
And it's just something that it seems like we aren't all that aware of. I mean, some of these show up in the newspapers or other news, but not all of them, of course.
Right. Many of them get almost no public attention because they're suicides. Many of the homicides get very little public attention. They're, shootings in poor neighborhoods, and there'll be a small story in the newspaper or on the TV news, and maybe something small when it goes to court, but not the sort of attention that you get, obviously, when you have one of these horrific tragedies like we had at Columbine or at Aurora. And yet, if you think about it, we had 13 people murdered at Columbine, we had 12 people murdered at Aurora, and we have 10 people every week in the state that die of gunfire. If you think about it, it's not that different from having that kind of a horrific event every week.
Burt, you started looking at these numbers after Aurora happened, I believe.
That's correct. Yeah, what we did was we got from the state health department all of the deaths by firearms for whatever reason over that 12-year time period, and then mapped them by neighborhood, basically 1,250 neighborhoods throughout Colorado. What we found were some real idiosyncrasies and some things you would not expect from the data. For example, we sort of made the assumption that you would have the most deaths in low-income neighborhoods. Well, when we looked at suicides, we found that it didn't matter what the poverty rate was in the neighborhood, the number of suicides were virtually not impacted by poverty. But then if you looked at homicides, you found that it was just a straight line curve where as the homicides increased, the poverty rate in the neighborhood increased. We also saw some amazing geographical differences where, for example, 4 of the top 5 neighborhoods for suicides in Colorado are all in the Grand Junction area. Talk to the coroner. They're not sure what's going on there. They're looking at it. They're doing a special report, but they just don't know. And then if you look at some of the homicides, you'll see that they traditionally, except for one exception, that they occur in the metro Denver area, specifically around the Denver-Aurora area.
And in a moment, we'll reveal how that is not the deadliest neighborhood, however. These, Kevin, are a mixture of types of gun deaths. I mean, for instance, these homicides might be a drive-by shooting. They might be something where the people know each other or not. Absolutely.
I mean, you have everything from street robberies to liquor store robberies to even some accidental shootings are classified as homicides. Murder-suicides, individual suicides. It really does run the gamut. I mean, and when we zeroed in on the deadliest neighborhood, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, one of the things that we found was that many of the cases just weren't like many of the other cases. So it wasn't a matter where you could say, here's the issue right here. It's if we could curb this one kind of death, we would dramatically drive down the numbers.
And I don't think, we don't know, do we, about how many of those firearms were legal or registered or?
No, the data just says basically that a gun was used. We don't know if it was a legal purchase, if it was somebody who'd passed it on from another one, or if it would have been taken in a robbery. We just don't know.
Well, all right, let's reveal now what you found to be the deadliest neighborhood, based on the numbers, of course. And where is that, Colorado?
It's in southeast Colorado Springs in an area called Pikes Peak Park. It's a suburban neighborhood that was developed in the 1960s, developed initially with a large tract of single-family homes, ranches, and bi-levels and tri-levels, and has filled in over the years with a number of apartment complexes. It's got a commercial district. It's got 3 public elementary schools and a middle school, and there are places where you can see poverty. It's out in the open, and there are places where you could pluck a row of houses out of there and drop them in almost any suburban neighborhood in the state, and they would fit right in.
So, in other words, that's what's interesting about this, is that it's not an unusual neighborhood in that way.
Right, and it's also interesting in that it had a high number of homicides and a high number of suicides. As Burt was talking about, we saw a lot of neighborhoods that had a high number of suicides and a smattering of homicides, or a high number of homicides and a smattering of suicides. This section of Pikes Peak Park, Census Tract 5400, as we refer to it officially, had 12 homicides and 12 suicides. So it ended with the most total gun deaths over that period and high numbers of both.
And it was built in the 1960s as something of a model community, wasn't it?
It was. I mean, it was, if you go back and look at the ads in the newspaper, which is a fun exercise, it was envisioned as a place with a mix of starter homes for young families and a little bit nicer homes, and parks, and easy access to major roads to get anywhere in the city, and schools, and just the whole mix of what you would want in a neighborhood.
What has changed about it since then?
The socioeconomic standing of the people who live there has been in steady decline for 40 years. In 1970, the people that lived in that area, the average family income was about $66,000 in today's dollars. And today, the median family income in that area is barely above $29,000. So that's one thing that's changed. There have been some other changes too. The neighborhood's much more diverse. Substantial number of people live in rental units, either apartments, or we even found through analysis of property records that about almost 1/3 of the single-family homes are rentals.
So it's kind of more transient population.
Definitely more transient, yes.
And how many deaths were in this neighborhood?
24. And the next largest was 20 for the whole state of Colorado, and most of those were suicides. And along the Front Range, the next largest was 19 in the southern part of Denver.
Well, let's take a look now at this deadliest neighborhood in Colorado Springs. It's called Pikes Peak Park, and here is Kevin Vaughan's report.
This is Jeannie. What's location of your emergency?
Please hurry up. Somebody shot my sister and my boyfriend. Please hurry up.
Ma'am, where are you at?
Oh, no. I don't know. Monterey.
Monterey at where, ma'am? Are you in a...
Oh, my God. I'm sorry. I don't know.
It's now been just over 100 days since the murder of 20 innocent children and 6 brave educators in Newtown, Connecticut. But consider this. Over those 100 days or so, more than 100 times as many Americans have fallen victim to gun violence. More than 2,000 of our fellow citizens struck down, often because they were just going about their daily round.
Colorado is equally known for 2 horrific mass shootings, Columbine and Aurora. But in the intervening 12 years, more than 6,000 of the state's residents died of gun violence. This is the story of Colorado's deadliest neighborhood.
Okay, can you add someone in, ma'am, what the address is?
It's Monterey and Carmel. Please hurry up.
Okay, what's happening there, ma'am?
I'm sorry.
What is happening there?
Somebody shot my sister and my boyfriend. Please,
Okay, ma'am, stay on the phone with me.
It occurred in 2008, and I had been a prosecutor at that point for, over 12, 13 years. And that one was one of the most senseless murders that I've ever prosecuted. You have Cesar and Myra, who were just innocent victims, hanging up yard sale signs in the cool early summer evening, and just gunned down for being in the wrong place at the wrong time, and not just shot once, but both of them were shot numerous times from an assault rifle. It was in front of Myra's sister and her son Pedro, and it was just very senseless. It just sticks in your mind on one of the cases where you just shake your head and you just say to yourself, man, what are things coming to?
Census Tract 5400 sits in an area that 50 years ago was heralded as the perfectly planned neighborhood, an oasis of affordable family homes just minutes from anywhere in Colorado Springs, a place where you could close your loan for $99. A half century later, those grand visions have given way to a very different reality.
Hessin wearing an all red hat, shorts, and a hoodie.
Apartments here is another huge area where we have a lot of calls for service. And the amazing thing about this complex is you see how dark it is. It's unbelievably dark. It's just dark, dark, dark. No lights in there whatsoever.
For me, I think the biggest challenges are you have so many apartment complexes condensed into such a small area that you have so it gives you a more transient population. And unfortunately, sometimes that attracts some more criminal activity than you might see in other areas where you don't have such a high density.
So we've had numerous calls here. I've been to quite a few calls in here just for various things. Shots fired, assaults, stabbings, domestic, a lot of domestic.
You do have some depressed socioeconomic issues within those areas.
Do you have any knives on you or anything? Why don't you turn around for me and just let me check real quick.
But I will say that there's also a lot of really good people that live in Pikes Peak Park. There's a lot of families. There's 3 elementary schools.
How do you spell nutrients?
Just because the neighborhood is not safe does not mean the schools are not safe. And I would say this is one of the safest schools I've ever worked in. Just because you see on the news tonight that there was a shooting at the corner of Shelton and Fountain does not mean don't send your child to school tomorrow. We are taking care of it. If you look at where the incidents happened, they didn't happen here at school. They probably didn't happen within a block because our community, even though it may be more dangerous, more violent than usual, they respect the school area. And so if there's going to be a shooting, they're not going to bring it onto school grounds. They're going to do it away from the school because they have so much respect for the schools and what we're doing in the schools. So they might go to the 7-Eleven or wherever they choose to do the crime.
At the time you bought, what sort of appealed to you about the neighborhood?
I grew up here. Wasn't too bad of a neighborhood back in the 80s, It's gotten progressively worse since. It's unfortunate that the neighborhood's gone downhill, when this street, as a matter of fact, was the Parade of Homes street, These were the top homes back when they were built back in the 60s.
40 years later, homeowner Corey Creekbaum says it's no longer where he wants to live.
Within a 4-block radius, I can count at least 7 murders or, a house that exploded back there for whatever reason or, it's the gang violence, I can't even park my truck on the street without worrying that the window's getting busted out. Definitely moving out of here, Plan is to move up into the Rock Rimmon area with any luck. It's sad to leave it behind, this was our first house, we've put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into it to make sure that, it was a decent home for the children, and now we get to walk away from it, just because of the neighborhood.
In recent months, members of Congress and state legislators alike have debated new gun control measures. In Colorado, that debate has been informed largely by the tragedy at Columbine High School in 1999 and the one at the Century 16 Theater in 2012. But the reality is that in between those two massacres, gun deaths in this state were unremitting. And in Census Tract 5400, 24 people lost their lives to gunshot wounds between 2000 and 2011.
That was Kevin Vaughan, and our thanks to him and all our colleagues from iNews at Rocky Mountain PBS. You can see their full report, including a map of gun deaths in neighborhoods across the state, at our website, rmpbs.org. Let's talk more about the characteristics of neighborhoods where gun violence is more prevalent than in others. My guest now is Leon Kelly, who has spent 29 years attacking the roots of such violence. As we've learned in the latest iNews report, there is a relationship between poverty and homicides by firearms. You are known, of course, in some of the metro neighborhoods as simply Reverend Leon Kelly. What do you think about that relationship between poverty and violence?
Well, you know, when some people feel that it's just a matter of survival, you know, and if they're put in an environment that they have to exist, they have to learn to survive, and how to do that is self-protection or self-preservation. And if by what many of my kids and others see on TV as to what's happening around the nation, of the tragic deaths that is happening, you know, it sends forth a form of fear. You know, and it allowed one to feel like I need to protect myself. I need to protect my family. You know, some of my little gangsters would develop that attitude of, I'd rather be tried by 12 than to be carried by 6. You know, so just the thought of being able to preserve your health and your safety, you know, by being having an equalizer, for example, you know, is a thought, unfortunately, that many have, you know, living in these kind of neighborhoods. Yeah.
And are the neighborhoods themselves deficient in opportunities for young people who are living in poverty?
Okay, I sort of feel like a lot of the neighborhoods are trying to keep up with the pace. But unfortunately, there's those that live within the neighborhoods who feel that the pace may be too slow. And by the time the pace of the neighborhood who's trying to provide support systems, there are those, again, who feel like those support systems may not be good enough to protect them or theirs. So they have to sometimes feel like they need to take the law in their own hands. You know, when I look at so many of my kids in the neighborhoods that I'm working with, and as well as the Springs where this piece was shot, you look at how those neighborhoods have mimic some of the larger cities that have been plagued with these kind of gangs. You wouldn't think at one point in time that Colorado Springs would be as aggressive in the areas of violence as it has been over these this last decade. You know, but again, you know, you look at a lot of these military towns where people are being transported from many cities that have been plagued with these kind of problems to a confined area, such as the Springs, that as we've noticed the migration throughout the nation of people and kids coming from plagued environments, moving out to other areas in hopes that they could have a better life. But as they are moving out from these areas, they're bringing those experiences with them. You know. So transit certainly plays a role, because you don't have people who are homeowners who take as much pride in the neighborhood. You look at a lot of transients. You know, again, Colorado Springs, you're there for a short period of time. If your family or parents were in the military, you're here for a short period of time, then you're gone. There's really has not been a lot of ownership of property or stake. You know, so there's
Is there a way to overcome that? To somehow instill more pride in the neighborhood?
Well, maybe as it is with this, the foundation that was built within the school. You heard the principal talk about, you know, this being a safety hub. And many of those kids that they're able to work with at that stage of life, to be able to build a strong foundation in their life, to let them see and understand that there are people that are concerned about your safety, your welfare. If they feel like the schools are a hub that could give them that type of safety, and they would be open to learning how to deal with one another without the forms of violence. That's a small step. But
that's what you do, isn't it? At Open Door Youth Gang Alternatives, try and give these kids a different focus.
You know, this is Cynthia going into our 29th year of dealing with this here, and so we're going into a second generation of kids who've been introduced to this type of mindset. One of the big things that we've been trying to do is to break the cycle of those who feel like the only way to exist in a certain community is to deal with self-preservation or protection of your own. To let them know that we are a community. Try to get it back to where it was when me and you were kids. We had a sense of community. We had a sense of neighborhood. We had a sense of fellowship, you know, amongst those that are in our block. You know, those that were in our block were our support systems, you know, which included, you know, our neighbors, the schools that was in the immediate area, the little grocery stores, all the other things, the churches. To sort of bring some of that back. You know, I'm old school, and I try to implement that into the learning of the kids that I deal with.
One last question. The newest gun laws that were passed a few weeks ago by the legislature and signed into law by the governor, does that have any bearing in the neighborhoods where you work? You know,
I often say that they could implement all the gun laws they want. Many of my kids and many of the gangsters who obtain these type of weapons, you know, they don't feel like it applies to them anyway, because many of them are not getting their guns legally. So all the gun laws you're going to apply are, in my opinion, to the law-abiding citizens, the good folk, you know, who are not out here committing these kind of crimes and things of that sort. So to continue to penalize the good folks, you know, I do have issues with that. If a kid want to get a gun, or anybody, a criminal want to get access to a gun, they will. We put all these gun laws in place. Self-preservation, the thought of that is still going to exist. The black market is going to continue to skyrocket, and it could actually get worse in the areas of them doing what they need to do to feel like they need to protect themselves by obtaining a weapon. So again, all the gun control laws, we need to not just look at that, we got to look at the mindset too. You know, that's in the middle stages of these kids who are committing these kind of crimes. That's the starting point in my opinion.
Well, this is a conversation we will continue another time. Obviously, there is a lot more to talk about. Thank you, Leon Kelly, for your insights in all of this tonight. Our last item for this week is about guns in the state economy. There has been plenty of other reactions since the Colorado legislature passed a law a few weeks ago to expand background checks on gun sales to include private and online sales, and another new law which bans sale of ammunition magazines larger than 15 rounds. There are two companies which manufacture firearms accessories who have announced they can't do business in a state that they feel is unfriendly to gun owners, and they're going to move their operations probably to Wyoming. Tonight, Steve Mort has a look at some other Colorado businesses. These are in the hunting industry, and what has happened to their sales in recent weeks.
Tyler Matthews and Josh Salt repair and refurbish archery equipment at their store in downtown Fort Collins. As well as bows and arrows, Gannett Ridge Hunting Equipment sells everything for the discerning hunter: clothing, tents, sleeping bags, and of course rifles. But Matthews says since the Colorado legislature passed new gun control laws, their business is changing.
We have seen a pickup in archery because of a lot of people are worried about their gun rights being taken away. They want a backup, you know, sport or another way to go out and shoot, enjoy the outdoors, you know, so we have seen a definite increase there.
But it's not all good news for Gannett Ridge. In addition to the brick-and-mortar store, Matthews and Salt run a busy online retail site, attracting customers from across the U.S. Since the new gun laws passed, online sales are down 30 to 40%.
There definitely within the industry has been backlash against just Colorado, period. And we are a Colorado company, so we have seen some decrease in our online sales.
According to Matthews, that backlash has extended to the 15% of their walk-in customers who visit the Fort Collins store from Wyoming. Several of them, he says, are now refusing to buy their shooting equipment in Colorado. Retailers are not the only ones feeling the impact of the recent gun control measures. Atkinson Expeditions is a small business that organizes hunts in Colorado, many for out-of-state hunters. Owner Wes Atkinson says he's seen $30,000 worth of cancellations since the gun bills passed, and a quarter of his customers have asked him to move his business out of Colorado. Atkinson says he's working on relocating to Nebraska, where he's scouting out new hunt locations.
It's common sense. I think we are going to have to adapt. As a small business owner, I think all of us in Colorado are having to adapt.
Retail sales in Colorado related to hunting totaled more than $465 million in 2011, according to the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation. While some small businesses in Colorado say they're deeply concerned, others say they're less worried and predict the new gun control laws will have a very minimal negative impact on their bottom line. Jack's Outdoor Gear, a chain of 6 large stores in Colorado and Iowa, says sales of hunting rifles have surged in recent weeks following the passage of Colorado's new gun control measures. And stocks of bullets are running short as people buy up large quantities of ammunition.
Are we selling a lot of things that people can bury ammunition in?
President Jim Quinlan says demand has increased even after he chose to stop selling assault weapons, like those used in the shootings in Aurora and Sandy Hook.
We stepped back from that business in December. It's an issue I'd struggled with for a while as we'd had the Aurora shootings. It was really a personal decision and a personal moral decision for me. This is not what I want our company to be about.
Some experts believe the impact of the new legislation will only have a minimal long-term effect on the Colorado economy. Mac Klaus from the University of Denver expects hunters will eventually return to the state despite the new gun laws.
I think eventually it'll wear off and people will stop making a statement and say, well, we really missed having a good time that we had up wherever we went, and they'll go back to the reason that they were going to go to Colorado in the first place.
With the summer hunting season just around the corner, many local businesses hope that prediction is accurate. For Colorado State of Mind, I'm Steve Mort.
Our thanks to Steve Mort. And that is Colorado State of Mind for this weekend. You can see it again or any of our programs by going to video.rmpbs.org. Thank you for tuning in this evening. I'm Cynthia Hessin. Good night.